The living room was quiet in the way early mornings often are. Soft light slipping through the curtains, the hum of the heater filling the air. Daniel stood near the couch, coffee cooling in his hand, watching his dog, Milo, curl himself tightly around an old gray blanket on the floor. It was nothing unusual at first. Milo loved that blanket. It smelled like home. But today something was different. Milo didn't settle. He stiffened. His ears twitched, his body tense as if bracing against something only he could feel. When Daniel took a step closer, Milo let out a low whine. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough to stop him. The dog pressed his chest harder against the blanket, paws spread wide, refusing to move. "Hey, buddy," Daniel murmured, forcing a smile. "What is it?" Milo's tail didn't wag. Instead it thumped once, slow, uncertain. His eyes stayed locked on the blanket, breathing shallow, almost protective. When Daniel reached down to lift the corner, Milo barked sharply and shoved his nose under the fabric, as if shielding something fragile. Daniel's chest tightened. A strange unease crept over him, the kind that makes your skin prickle without reason. The blanket shifted. Just barely. Not from a draft. Not from Milo. Warmth radiated beneath it. Daniel froze, heart pounding as Milo pressed himself closer, trembling now, guarding, waiting. Because whatever the dog sensed beneath that blanket was far from ordinary. Before we continue, remember to like, share and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The house woke slowly. Morning light slid through the thin curtains, pale and careful, touching the edges of furniture like it didn't want to disturb anything. The heater clicked on and off, a steady rhythm against the hush. Somewhere outside, a car passed. Tires whispered over damp pavement. Daniel stood barefoot in the kitchen, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. The smell filled the room, warm, familiar, grounding. This was how most of his mornings began. Predictable. Calm. Milo lay on the living room floor, curled into himself, chin resting on an old gray blanket. It was frayed along the edges, soft from years of use. Daniel had meant to throw it away more than once, but Milo always found it again, dragging it back like it mattered. Daniel glanced over, smiled faintly. "Good morning," he said, voice still rough from sleep. Milo didn't lift his head. That was unusual. Usually Milo greeted mornings with a slow thump of his tail, a lazy stretch, maybe a hopeful look toward the leash hanging by the door. Today his body stayed tight. Still. Daniel poured his coffee and leaned against the counter, watching him. First it was nothing. Just a feeling. The kind that slips in quietly. No reason, no clear thought. Just awareness. Milo's ears twitched. Once. Then again. His breathing was shallow, measured. Not relaxed. Not asleep. His eyes stayed open, fixed on the blanket beneath him. Daniel took a sip of coffee. Too hot. He winced and set the mug down, eyes still on the dog. "Milo," he said gently. The dog's tail moved, not a wag. Just a single slow tap against the floor. Daniel stepped closer. The floor creaked under his weight. Milo's head lifted instantly. His posture changed. Shoulders stiff. Neck extended. His body angled slightly forward as if bracing. Not aggressive. Not fearful. Protective. Daniel stopped. That alone made his chest tighten. "You okay, buddy?" Milo let out a low sound, not a growl. A whine. Soft, strained. His eyes flicked from Daniel back to the blanket, then stayed there. Daniel crouched down, resting one hand on his knee. Close he noticed more. Milo's nostrils flared. His ears weren't pinned back, but they weren't relaxed either. His paws pressed into the blanket, spreading wide, holding it in place. As if it could move. Daniel reached out instinctively, fingers brushing the air above Milo's head. Before he could touch him, Milo barked. Sharp. Sudden. Daniel froze. Milo had never barked at him like that. "I'm sorry," Daniel said quickly, heart jumping. "Hey, it's okay." Milo didn't back away. He leaned forward instead, nose pushing under the blanket, tugging it closer to his chest. His body trembled now, not violently, just enough to feel. Daniel swallowed. A quiet unease crept up his spine. "Hey," he whispered. "What's under there?" The blanket shifted. Just a little. Daniel's breath caught. He stood slowly, every movement careful, deliberate. The room felt smaller now. The air heavier. Even the heater seemed louder. "It's just a blanket," he said, more to himself than to Milo. But Milo didn't relax. He rose to his feet, standing over the blanket, legs planted firmly on either side. His tail stayed low. His gaze never left what lay beneath. Daniel stepped closer again. Milo blocked him. Not forcefully. Just enough. "Milo," Daniel said softly, trying to keep his voice calm. "Move, okay?" Milo didn't respond. He didn't look at Daniel. He leaned down, nose pressed against the blanket, breathing slow and deep, as if memorizing a scent. As if confirming something. Daniel's heart began to pound. The blanket moved again. This time there was no mistaking it. Not a draft. Not Milo. A gentle rise. And fall. Warmth radiated faintly upward, subtle but real. Daniel crouched down, his knees touching the floor. "Milo," he breathed. Milo turned his head then, just slightly. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, unspoken, instinctive. Trust. Milo whined again, softer this time. Daniel reached for the corner of the blanket. His fingers hovered. The room seemed to hold its breath. He hesitated, pulled his hand back, ran it through his hair instead, trying to steady himself. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay. I hear you." Milo didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was. Guarding. Waiting. Daniel sat back on his heels, staring at the blanket, his mind racing through possibilities, none of them making sense. A stray animal? A heating pad left on? No. This was different. Alive. He swallowed hard. Outside, the morning continued like nothing was wrong. A bird chirped. A door closed somewhere down the street. Inside, everything had shifted. Daniel reached for his phone, hands slightly unsteady, eyes never leaving the blanket. Milo stayed close. Closer than ever. Because whatever lay beneath that worn gray fabric, Milo already knew. And he wasn't leaving it. Not for anything. Daniel stayed on the floor longer than he meant to. His phone rested in his hand, screen dark, untouched. He wasn't sure who he would even call yet. Emergency services felt too big. Too sudden. And still, he hadn't lifted the blanket. Milo stood firm. Every muscle in his body looked engaged. Like a quiet tension ran through him from nose to tail. His weight was evenly balanced, paws planted wide on either side of the blanket. He wasn't shaking anymore. He was steady now. Focused. Daniel shifted slightly, his knee brushing the carpet. Milo's ears flicked back for a moment, just enough to acknowledge the movement, then returned forward. His eyes stayed down. "Okay," Daniel said softly. "Okay. I'm not touching it." Milo didn't look up. Daniel exhaled slowly, the way he did when trying to calm himself at work. Slow in. Slower out. The room smelled like coffee and clean laundry and something else, faint, almost sweet. He couldn't place it. He leaned back against the couch, keeping his movements deliberate. "Why won't you move?" he asked quietly. Milo's tail lifted slightly, then settled again. His breathing synced with the gentle rise and fall beneath the blanket. That was when Daniel noticed something else. Milo wasn't just guarding. He was adjusting. Every few seconds, he nudged the blanket with his nose, small, careful motions, tucking it in, keeping whatever was under there covered. Warm. Daniel's chest tightened. He'd seen Milo act protective before. Once when a toddler at the park got too close to a busy road. Another time during a thunderstorm, when Milo wedged himself between Daniel and the door. But this was different. This wasn't fear. It was purpose. Daniel pushed himself up slowly and stood, giving Milo space. His joints creaked louder than usual in the quiet room. "I'm just going to grab my jacket," he said calmly, narrating every move like Milo needed reassurance. "I'll be right back." Milo didn't respond. He didn't even glance up. Daniel walked backward toward the hallway, then turned and retrieved his jacket from the hook. When he came back, Milo was still there, unchanged. Vigilant. The blanket rose. Fell. Daniel swallowed hard. He crouched again, this time farther away, lowering himself to Milo's level without approaching. Milo, he said gently, did you find something? The dog's ears twitched. He finally looked at Daniel. Just for a moment. In that brief glance, Daniel saw something that made his throat tighten. Not fear, not excitement. Concern. Milo turned back to the blanket and nudged it again, careful not to press too hard. Daniel felt a strange pull in his chest. Okay, he whispered. Okay. I trust you. He reached for his phone again, this time unlocking it. His thumb hovered over the emergency number. He hesitated. What if I'm wrong? He murmured. What if it's nothing? Milo let out a soft huff through his nose, almost a breath. Almost impatient. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. That's what I thought. He dialed. The operator's voice came through calm and steady, grounding him. Emergency services. What's your situation? Daniel cleared his throat. I think there's someone in my house, he said carefully. Under a blanket. They're alive. My dog won't let me near them. There was a pause. Are you in immediate danger, sir? No, Daniel said quickly. No. My dog is calm. Protective. I think someone needs help. Stay where you are, the operator said. Help is on the way. Daniel hung up and sat back down, his back against the couch, knees drawn up slightly. Time slowed. Minutes stretched. Milo shifted his weight once, adjusting his stance, then settled again. He lowered his head and rested his chin lightly on the blanket, ears still alert. The movement beneath the fabric grew more noticeable now, a small twitch. A faint sigh. Daniel's eyes burned. You're okay, he whispered, not sure who he was talking to. Outside, a siren sounded faintly in the distance. Milo's ears perked. He didn't leave. The sound grew closer. Red and blue lights flashed through the front window, painting the walls in soft color. The knock at the door was firm but calm. Daniel stood. I'm coming, he called. He opened the door to two paramedics and a police officer, their expressions attentive but unalarmed. It's in here, Daniel said quietly, leading them inside. They stopped short when they saw Milo. The dog didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply stood taller, eyes flicking briefly toward the strangers before returning to the blanket. One of the paramedics crouched slowly. Hey buddy, she said softly. You're doing a good job. Milo didn't move. Daniel felt his heart hammer. I think there's someone under there, he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. The paramedic nodded and looked to her partner. Let's take this slow. She reached out carefully. Milo watched her hand. When it came too close, he stepped forward, just one step, blocking again. Not aggressive. Clear. The paramedic withdrew her hand. Okay, she said calmly. I see you. Daniel held his breath. The officer glanced at him. Has he been like this the whole time? Yes, Daniel said. He won't leave it. The paramedic looked back at Milo, then at the faint movement beneath the blanket. He's protecting someone, she said quietly. Milo lowered his head again, pressing closer. And for the first time since the morning began, Daniel understood. Whatever was under that blanket wasn't just alive. It was vulnerable. And Milo wasn't moving until help truly arrived. ChatGPT can. For a long moment no one moved. The paramedics stayed crouched near the edge of the living room, hands resting loosely on their knees. The police officer stood a few steps back, giving the space a respectful distance. Milo remained exactly where he was, body angled protectively over the blanket, eyes alert, breathing steady. Daniel felt caught between them, between logic and instinct, between what made sense and what Milo clearly already knew. I should have noticed sooner, Daniel said quietly, mostly to himself. His voice sounded strange in his own ears. Thinner. He's been off since last night. I thought he was just tired. One of the paramedics nodded gently. It's easy to explain things away, she said. Especially when nothing like this has ever happened before. Daniel rubbed his palms together, suddenly aware of how cold they felt. I thought he was being possessive, he admitted. About the blanket, I mean. He does that sometimes. Milo flicked an ear at the sound of his name but didn't look up. The other paramedic leaned forward slightly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Dogs don't usually guard objects this way, he said. Not without a reason. Daniel swallowed. The blanket shifted again. Just enough to make everyone notice. The room seemed to tighten around that small movement. The air felt heavier, warmer. Milo adjusted his stance instinctively, lowering his body just a bit, creating a barrier. I almost pulled it off, Daniel said, his voice catching. I almost forced him to move. The female paramedic glanced up at him. But you didn't. Daniel shook his head. No, he said. He wouldn't let me. And I listened. That felt important. The officer stepped closer, careful not to startle Milo. Sir, he said calmly, can you walk us through what happened before this? Anything unusual? Doors unlocked? Windows open? Daniel took a breath, steadying himself. I went to bed around 11, he said. Everything was normal. Locked up. Milo slept by the bed like he always does. I didn't hear anything overnight. He paused. But this morning, he wasn't with me in the kitchen. That should have been the first sign. Milo never missed breakfast. The paramedic nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes people come looking for warmth, she said softly. Shelter. Especially when temperatures drop overnight. Daniel looked down at the blanket again. Understanding came slowly, painfully. I thought he was anxious, Daniel said. I thought I needed to calm him down. Milo's breathing deepened slightly at the sound of Daniel's voice. His ears relaxed just a fraction, as if he knew Daniel wasn't upset anymore. I kept telling him it was okay, Daniel continued, that there was nothing there. His voice broke on the last word. The male paramedic shifted closer, stopping well short of Milo. There's a difference between calming a dog and overriding them, he said gently. You chose the right one. Daniel nodded, though his eyes stung. I almost didn't, he whispered. For a moment everyone just listened. To the quiet hum of the heater. To the faint sounds of the street outside. To the slow, uneven breathing beneath the blanket. The officer spoke again, voice steady. We're going to need to uncover them, he said. But we'll do it carefully. Together. Milo didn't react. He stayed watchful. The paramedic closest to him shifted her weight and spoke softly, directing her voice not at Daniel, but at Milo. You've done really well, she said. We're here to help now. Milo's tail moved once. A small motion. Not approval, but acknowledgement. Daniel watched closely as the paramedic slowly extended one hand, palm down, letting Milo see her. She didn't reach for the blanket yet. She waited. Milo sniffed the air. His nose twitched. His eyes flicked to Daniel just briefly, then back to the blanket. Daniel leaned forward slightly. It's okay, he said softly. They're here. Milo hesitated. His body remained tense, but the tremor he'd held earlier was gone. What remained was focus. Decision. The paramedic waited another moment, then gently pinched the edge of the blanket between her fingers. Milo stiffened. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. But Milo didn't bark. He didn't block her. He simply leaned closer, nose almost touching the fabric, as if preparing himself. The blanket lifted just an inch. Warm air escaped, and with it a sound. Soft, barely there. A breath. The paramedic froze. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I hear you. She lowered the blanket again immediately. Milo exhaled. The tension in the room broke just enough for everyone to breathe again. Daniel pressed a hand to his mouth, emotion flooding in all at once, relief, fear, guilt, gratitude. I thought he was overreacting, Daniel said, tears slipping free now. I thought I knew better. The paramedic looked up at him, eyes kind. Sometimes, she said, the signs don't look like emergencies. They look like inconveniences. That landed hard. Milo lowered his head again, resting his chin gently against the blanket, eyes half-lidded but alert. Still guarding. Still waiting. Daniel knelt beside him, close but not touching, matching his calm. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't understand. Milo's ear flicked back toward him. Just once. As if to say you do now. And slowly, carefully, with everyone finally listening the way Milo had all along, they prepared to uncover the truth. The room felt different now. Not calmer but clearer. Everyone had shifted into the same quiet rhythm Milo had been holding since morning. Slow movements. Soft voices. Intentional pauses. The paramedics repositioned slightly, creating space without crowding. The police officer stepped back toward the doorway, radio silent at his shoulder. No one rushed. Milo remained at the center of it all, still standing over the blanket, still unmoving. The female paramedic glanced at Daniel. We may need him to step aside, she said carefully. Just enough to check breathing and condition. Daniel nodded, though his stomach tightened. He turned toward Milo, lowering himself onto one knee so he wasn't towering over him. Hey, he said softly. Buddy. Milo's ears twitched. Daniel reached out slowly and rested his hand against Milo's shoulder, light pressure familiar. Milo accepted the touch, but his body didn't relax. Can you move just a little? Daniel asked. Just for a second. Milo didn't respond. Daniel tried again, gentler. Milo, come. It was a command Milo knew well. Normally, he followed it without hesitation, without thought. This time he stayed exactly where he was. The refusal wasn't dramatic. It was absolute. Milo shifted his weight lower, chest closer to the blanket, his stance widening just enough to make his message clear. Not now. The paramedic watched closely. That's instinct, she said quietly. Not defiance. Daniel nodded, swallowing the tightness in his throat. I know, he said. I can feel it. He sat back on his heels and lifted his hands slightly, showing Milo he wouldn't push. It's okay, he said. I won't make you. Milo's breathing steadied again. The paramedic moved closer, this time approaching from the side rather than head-on. She stayed low, her presence calm and predictable. I'm going to lift the blanket just enough to see their face, she said. You stay right there. Milo watched her carefully. When her fingers touched the edge of the blanket again, Milo rose slightly, not blocking but hovering. Watching. Ready. The blanket lifted. Light spilled beneath it. Daniel leaned forward despite himself, heart pounding. A face appeared. Pale. Still. Framed by tangled hair. The skin looked cold but not lifeless. Lips parted slightly. Breathing. Barely. Oh my God, Daniel whispered. The paramedic moved with practiced efficiency now but still slowly. She checked the person's chest movement. The color of their skin. She spoke softly, as if loud sounds might break something fragile. They're alive, she said. Weak but alive. Milo lowered his head immediately, nose hovering inches from the person's cheek. He sniffed gently, then let out a soft huff, warm breath, steady. The person stirred faintly. A tiny movement. A sound caught in their throat. Milo froze, then relaxed just a fraction, sensing the change. Daniel felt his knees weaken. He reached out without thinking, then stopped himself. Can I? He asked. The paramedic nodded. Just talk, she said. Let them hear a calm voice. Daniel leaned in slightly, keeping his distance. You're safe, he said quietly. You're inside. Help's here. The person didn't open their eyes, but their breathing shifted, deeper now, more regular. The paramedic nodded to her partner. Let's get them warm, he said. A thermal blanket was unfolded carefully, layered over the gray one Milo had guarded so fiercely. The dog watched the movement closely, nose following every fold. When the paramedic reached under to slide an arm beneath the person's shoulders, Milo stepped forward. Not aggressively, protectively. Daniel's heart jumped. "It's okay," he said quickly. "They're helping." Milo hesitated. Then slowly, reluctantly, he shifted just enough to allow the paramedic's hand through. He stayed close. So close his fur brushed the paramedic's sleeve. Instinct hadn't disappeared. It had simply adapted. The officer watched quietly, something thoughtful in his expression. "That dog saved a life," he said under his breath. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. As the paramedics began their careful work, Milo finally sat down beside the person, body angled toward them, head high. He hadn't been ordered. He hadn't been trained for this. He had simply known. In that moment, Daniel understood something deeply. Obedience was learned. Instinct was older. And when the two collided, Milo had chosen the one that mattered most. The one that said, "Protect first. Explain later." And because of that choice, someone was still breathing. The moment stretched. Not long but deep. As if time itself had slowed to let everyone absorb what had just been revealed. The person beneath the blanket was small, curled inward, wrapped tightly, as if trying to disappear into warmth that hadn't been there until Milo found them. The paramedics worked carefully, voices low, movements measured. One checked a pulse at the neck. Another adjusted the thermal blanket, tucking it gently around the person's shoulders. Milo watched every step. His ears stayed forward. His eyes followed hands, faces, motion. He didn't interfere, but he didn't retreat either. His body remained angled protectively, close enough to feel, close enough to respond if something changed. Daniel sat on the floor now, legs folded beneath him, hands resting uselessly on his thighs. He couldn't stop staring. "I didn't even hear them come in," he said quietly. "I lock everything." The female paramedic glanced up at him. "They might have come in earlier," she said. "Before you went to bed. Or when you let the dog out last night." Daniel thought back. The cold air. The way Milo had lingered by the door. "I thought he just didn't want to come in," Daniel said. "I thought he was being stubborn." Milo's tail gave a small sweep against the floor. Not defensive. Just present. The person beneath the blankets shifted again, more noticeably this time. Their brows knit together slightly, lips parting as if trying to speak, or breathe more deeply. "Easy," the paramedic murmured. "You're safe." She checked their temperature again, concern crossing her face. "They're severely hypothermic," she said. "But stable enough for transport." The word hypothermic landed hard. Daniel's chest tightened. "All night," he whispered. The paramedic nodded gently. "That blanket helped," she said. "And the dog." Milo lowered his head again, nose hovering close to the person's cheek. He didn't lick. Didn't whine. He simply breathed slow, steady breaths, as if lending warmth in the only way he knew how. The person's eyes fluttered. Just barely open. Dark. Confused. They didn't focus on the paramedics first. They focused on Milo. Their gaze lingered there, unfocused but aware. Their lips trembled, then curved faintly. Not quite a smile, but something close. Milo held still, as if he understood the weight of that moment. Daniel felt tears rise again, uninvited and unstoppable. "Hey," he said softly. "You're okay." The person's eyes shifted slightly, catching the sound of his voice. Their mouth moved. A whisper escaped, so faint it almost wasn't there. "Warm." The paramedic leaned in immediately. "That's good," she said. "That's very good." She nodded to her partner, who adjusted the four with practiced care. "We're going to take you somewhere warmer," he said calmly. "Somewhere safe." The person blinked once. Slow. Then their eyes closed again. Milo exhaled deeply, a long breath he'd been holding for hours. Daniel noticed it then, truly noticed. Milo had been awake all night, guarding, holding position, refusing comfort for himself so someone else could survive. Daniel reached out, this time without hesitation, and rested his hand against Milo's back. Warm. Solid. Real. Good boy, he whispered. Milo didn't turn, but his posture softened just a fraction. The paramedics prepared the stretcher, moving it into position with quiet efficiency. As they began the careful transfer, Milo rose immediately, stepping forward, concern flaring again. It's okay, Daniel said quickly. I'm right here. Milo hesitated, then followed the movement step by step, staying close as the person was lifted. His nose hovered near their hand until the very last second. When the stretcher wheels locked into place, Milo stopped. He sat, still watching, still guarding even now. The officer stepped closer to Daniel, his voice low. They'll be okay, he said. You did the right thing. Daniel nodded, though the weight in his chest didn't lift. I almost didn't, he admitted. The officer looked at Milo. But he did. The paramedics began to roll the stretcher toward the door. Milo stood abruptly, letting out a soft whine, the first real sound he'd made in minutes. Daniel's heart jumped. It's okay, he said again. They're going to help. Milo watched them go, muscles taut, eyes locked. At the doorway, the female paramedic paused and looked back. He can come with us to the porch, she said. If that helps him. Daniel nodded immediately. Milo followed, stepping carefully, as if afraid the moment would shatter if he moved too fast. He stopped just short of the threshold, watching as the stretcher was lifted into the ambulance. The doors closed gently. Not rushed. Not loud. The siren didn't start right away. The ambulance pulled away slowly, lights glowing softly in the gray morning. Milo stood there long after it disappeared. Then finally he turned. He looked up at Daniel. His tail wagged once. Daniel knelt and wrapped his arms around him, pressing his face into Milo's fur, breathing him in. You felt it, Daniel whispered. Didn't you? Milo leaned into him fully now, weight heavy and trusting. Behind them, the living room looked the same. But everything had changed. Because beneath an old gray blanket, Milo hadn't just found warmth. He'd found a life, and held on to it long enough for the world to catch up. The house felt empty after they left. Not quiet empty. The kind of emptiness that lingers in the air, pressing softly against the walls, reminding you that something important had passed through and was gone now. Daniel stood in the doorway for a long moment, Milo beside him, both of them watching the street where the ambulance had disappeared. The red glow had faded. Morning returned to its normal color. Gray. Muted. Real. Milo exhaled again, slower this time, then turned and walked back inside. His steps were heavier now, his posture looser, as if the tension that had carried him through the night had finally loosened its grip. Daniel closed the door gently. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have. He followed Milo into the living room. The old gray blanket still lay on the floor, rumpled and misshapen, no longer sheltering anything at all, except memory. Milo approached it slowly. He sniffed once, twice, then circled the spot and lowered himself down, resting his head on his paws. His eyes stayed open, unfocused, watching the space where the person had been. Daniel sank onto the couch. His hands trembled now that there was nothing left to do. He let them. The officer had stayed behind briefly, finishing notes, asking quiet questions. Nothing invasive. Nothing accusatory. Just enough to close the loop. You did everything right, the officer had said before leaving. Your dog did more. Daniel nodded, still trying to absorb that truth. Now alone again, it all rushed back at once. The almost mistake. The hesitation. The moment he'd nearly pulled the blanket away without listening. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. I almost didn't hear you, he whispered. Milo didn't lift his head, but his tail moved once, slow against the carpet. Daniel stayed there, breathing in the familiar smells of home. Coffee gone cold, dog fur, clean fabric, grounding himself in the present. Time passed. He wasn't sure how much. Eventually, his phone buzzed. The sound startled him. He picked it up, heart jumping again, and saw the hospital number on the screen. His breath caught. "Hello," he answered. "Hi, this is County General," a calm voice said. "I'm calling to update you on the individual brought in from your residence this morning." Daniel stood immediately. "Yes," he said. "Yes, how are they?" There was a pause. "Not a bad one. Careful one." "They're stable," the nurse said. "Severely hypothermic, dehydrated, but conscious now. You and your dog likely saved their life." Daniel closed his eyes. Air left his lungs in a shaky rush. "They were found just in time," the nurse continued. "A few more hours, it could have been very different." Daniel nodded even though she couldn't see him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for calling." After he hung up, he stood there for a moment, phone still in his hand. Then he sat down on the floor beside Milo. Milo looked up at him slowly, eyes tired but attentive. "They're okay," Daniel said. "You did it." Milo's ears flicked. His tail wagged once, soft, restrained. Daniel rested his forehead against Milo's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. Milo leaned into the contact, finally allowing his weight to settle fully. His eyes closed. For the first time since the night before, he slept. The day unfolded gently after that. Daniel canceled his plans. Let the hours stretch. He cleaned the house slowly, deliberately, as if restoring order mattered. He washed the gray blanket but didn't throw it away. He folded it neatly, set it aside. Milo slept through most of the afternoon, rising only to drink water, to follow Daniel from room to room, to check the front door once before settling again. As evening approached, another call came. This one was different. A doctor this time. "They're awake," she said. A bit confused but aware. "They asked about the dog." Daniel smiled through the ache in his chest. "What did they say?" The doctor paused, then softened her tone. "They said, tell him thank you. He kept me warm." Daniel looked at Milo, who lay nearby, eyes half open, watching him. "He did," Daniel said quietly. "He really did." After the call ended, Daniel sat beside Milo and scratched behind his ears, slow and steady. "You stayed," he murmured. "All night. You stayed." Milo sighed, content now, his breathing deep and even. Outside, the sky darkened again, the day folding gently into evening. Inside, the house felt different. Fuller, warmer, grounded in something deeper than routine. A life had brushed against theirs. And because Milo had chosen instinct over comfort, because Daniel had chosen trust over control, that life was still here, still breathing, still moving forward. Not every rescue comes with sirens. Not every miracle announces itself. Sometimes, it looks like a dog who refuses to move, and a man who finally listens. The days that followed moved quietly, not slow, just gentle, as if the house itself had learned to breathe differently. Morning returned, bringing soft light and familiar sounds, but Daniel noticed how everything felt slightly altered. The hum of the heater seemed warmer. The floorboards creaked with a softer echo. Even the air carried a sense of calm that hadn't been there before. Milo stayed close, closer than usual. Not anxious, not needy, just present. He followed Daniel from room to room, settling nearby wherever he stopped. When Daniel sat at the table, Milo lay at his feet. When Daniel stood at the sink, Milo rested against the cabinet, watching the window. Trust had shifted, deepened. Daniel found himself paying attention in new ways. To the tilt of Milo's ears, to the rhythm of his breathing, to the moments when Milo paused, listening to something Daniel couldn't hear yet. He didn't question those moments anymore. He respected them. The hospital called again 2 days later. "They're recovering well," the nurse said. "Rewarming was successful. No permanent damage." Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was still holding. "They've been asking about you," she added. "And about the dog." Daniel smiled, glancing down at Milo, who lay nearby with his chin resting on his paws. "I'm glad," Daniel said. Tell them Milo's doing great." The nurse laughed softly. "I think that'll mean a lot." After the call, Daniel sat on the floor beside Milo and rested his back against the couch. "You hear that?" he said. "You've got fans." Milo's tail thumped once, slow and steady. Healing came in small pieces. In routine walks taken at an easier pace. In shared quiet on the porch as evening settled in. In the way Milo slept more deeply now. His body no longer wound tight with vigilance. Sometimes, though, Daniel noticed Milo pause near the living room window late at night, ears lifting, head tilting slightly. Listening. Daniel never interrupted. He simply sat nearby and waited until Milo relaxed again. Trust worked both ways now. One afternoon, Daniel took the gray blanket from the closet and spread it across the couch. Milo watched carefully as Daniel smoothed it out, his posture alert but calm. "It's clean," Daniel said softly. "See." Milo approached slowly, sniffed, then climbed up beside Daniel, circling once before settling against him. The tension that had once lived in that fabric was gone. What remained was warmth, connection. Daniel rested his hand on Milo's back and closed his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for trusting me too." Milo leaned in, weight solid and grounding. Outside, the world continued. People passing, cars moving, weather changing. But inside, something had settled into place. Healing didn't erase what had happened. It integrated it. Made room for it. Daniel found himself thinking less about the fear of that morning and more about what followed. The listening, the slowing down, the decision to trust something deeper than logic. Milo had shown him that. Not with words, but with presence, with stillness, with instinct. That night, as they prepared for bed, Milo paused at the doorway, glancing back toward the living room one last time. Daniel waited. Milo turned back and followed him into the bedroom, tail relaxed, steps easy. The house grew quiet again. Safe. Whole. Trust didn't come from control. Came from paying attention. And both of them were listening now to each other, to the silence, to the quiet signals that mattered most. Weeks passed. Not marked by anything dramatic. Just lived. The season shifted slowly outside, the kind of change you only notice when you pause long enough to feel it. Mornings grew cooler. Light lingered differently on the walls. The neighborhood settled into a quieter rhythm. Inside the house, life returned to routine. But it wasn't the same routine as before. Daniel noticed it most in the pauses. In the moments when Milo stopped during a walk, ears lifting, nose tilting into the air. Daniel no longer tugged the leash or urged him forward. He stopped to listen. Waited. Sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes a car passed. A door opened. A distant voice carried on the wind. But the act of listening itself had changed them. One afternoon, Daniel received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just his name written carefully. Inside was a simple card. The handwriting was uneven, as if written by someone still regaining strength. "I don't remember much from that night," it read. "But I remember warmth. I remember breathing when I didn't think I could. And I remember your dog's eyes, calm, steady, refusing to leave. Please tell him thank you. Because of him, I'm still here." Daniel read it twice. Then a third time. His throat tightened. Milo lay nearby, half asleep, one ear flicking at the sound of the paper. Daniel knelt beside him and rested the card on the floor. "That's for you," he said softly. Milo sniffed it once, then looked up at Daniel, tail giving a slow, gentle wag. That was enough. Life didn't transform overnight. There were still long days, still worries, still moments of doubt, but something fundamental had shifted. Daniel trusted quiet things now. Small signals. The way Milo's body leaned toward something unseen. The way silence could carry meaning if you let it. The gray blanket stayed folded neatly on the couch. Not as a reminder of fear, but of presence. Of choosing to stay. Some evenings, Daniel sat with Milo beside him. The blanket draped loosely across their legs, the house dim and peaceful. No television. No phone. Just shared stillness. Milo would rest his head against Daniel's knee, eyes half closed, breathing slow and deep. And Daniel would think about how close everything had come to slipping past unnoticed. How easy it would have been to hurry. To assume. to dismiss. Instead, a dog had listened, and a man had followed. One quiet night, as Daniel turned off the lights and headed toward the bedroom, Milo paused by the living room once more. He looked at the blanket, then at Daniel. Daniel smiled softly. "We're good," he said. "You did your job." Milo's tail wagged once. They walked away together, steps in sync, the house settling into darkness behind them. Some bonds are built through years. Others are forged in a single moment, when instinct meets trust, and staying makes all the difference. From that morning on, Daniel and Milo moved through the world changed. Not louder, not braver, just more aware, more connected, forever listening, forever together.